Hello, friend, and welcome to the Sleepy Meteorologist. Tonight, we're drifting gently into the quiet science behind why hurricanes slow down near land. Maybe your day has been long, filled with noise, movement, or thoughts that clung like clouds. Or perhaps you're simply here for the soft unraveling of the sky's gentle mysteries. This is your moment now, a place to breathe slowly, to listen to the hush between the winds, to feel the atmosphere settle around you like a favorite blanket. What time is it where you are? Is it twilight, dusk, or deep into night? Are you listening from a quiet apartment, a cozy bedroom, or somewhere with the soft patter of rain outside? No matter where you are, the forecast here is always the same: calm, curious, and kind. In each episode, we wander through the wonders of weather, not to study or memorize, but to feel, to notice, to let our thoughts float like cirrus clouds on a sleepy jet stream. If these soothing meteorological journeys bring you peace, feel free to like or subscribe, only if it feels gentle to do so. Now, snuggle in. Let's begin. Hello again, gentle listener. Tonight, we begin not with thunder, nor with rain, but with something far softer, the whisper before the wind. There is a moment, delicate and easy to miss, that arrives before a hurricane touches land. A hush, a stillness so complete, it feels as though the world is holding its breath. The birds go quiet, the air thickens, heavy with unseen tension, yet wrapped in calm. This chapter is about that silence, that pregnant pause before nature begins to stir. Close your eyes for a moment, if you haven't already. Picture a coastline under a pewter sky. The sea is dark but calm, barely moving, as though even the waves are reluctant to break the hush. The trees are still, their leaves unmoving. Somewhere in the distance, the clouds are gathering, but here, everything waits. This stillness is not empty. It's full of subtle signs. The humidity is higher than usual. The air feels warm, but not welcoming. It presses gently on your skin, like the weight of a thick blanket. Barometers dip. Invisible, slow changes unfold in the atmosphere above. The outermost tendrils of the storm are drawing near, brushing the sky with veils of cirrus clouds, high, feathered, and pale. These are not storm clouds yet, just a soft prelude. To meteorologists, this calm is a story in itself. It's part of the life cycle of every major tropical cyclone. When a hurricane approaches land, the dynamics of the storm begin to shift, even before landfall. The ocean's heat is still feeding the storm, but the land ahead begins to whisper back, not in force, but in friction. But we're not there yet. For now, we linger in the calm. Perhaps you felt this stillness before, on a beach, in your backyard, near the water's edge. A sense that something large is coming, but not yet arrived. It's not fear, not urgency, just awareness. If you listen carefully, you might hear the wind start to stir far offshore. But here, close to land, it remains quiet. The clouds thicken gradually. The light becomes silvery and diffuse, like a soft filter over the sun. Even sound changes. Voices seem to carry differently in the dense air, dulled as if wrapped in wool. Sailors and coastal dwellers have long spoken of this stillness. They call it eerie, but not in a way that frightens, just in the way that commands attention. The earth is transitioning. The rhythm is about to change. Tonight, we stay in this pause, this liminal space between normal and storm. There is beauty here too. The air feels like a held note. Time slows. You might notice things you usually miss, the shape of the clouds, the way your breath moves in and out, the gentle stirrings of the world waiting for something to begin. We'll explore the storm soon. We'll talk of winds and waves and why hurricanes behave the way they do. But not yet. For now, this is your moment to rest in the quiet, the whisper before the wind. Welcome back, friend. Tonight, we drift deeper into the heart of our journey. We follow the hurricane as it approaches land and gently begins to slow. Hurricanes are wanderers of the open sea, drawn forward by broad currents, fueled by the warm embrace of ocean waters. Out over the ocean, they move swiftly, spun by the Coriolis force, pulled gently by the steering flow of the upper atmosphere. They are, in their own way, dancers, whirling, graceful, powerful. But as they near land, something begins to shift. The dance becomes slower, more hesitant. The storm begins to lose its rhythm. Why? The answer, like much in meteorology, is quiet and layered. It begins with friction, the soft but stubborn resistance of land against the flow of air. Over the ocean, the surface is smooth and welcoming. Warm water rises into the storm's center, feeding it, energizing it. But as soon as the outer edge touches land, the lower part of the storm begins to encounter trees, buildings, hills, and rough terrain. These break up the flow. The storm's well-ordered structure begins to tangle. Think of it like a spinning top gliding across a smooth floor. It whirls freely, undisturbed, but the moment it meets a patch of carpet or a surface that's uneven, it begins to wobble, to slow. The same is true for a hurricane. Without its full oceanic fuel supply, moisture and heat from the sea surface, the storm begins to lose strength. Its internal engine sputters just a bit. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, steadily. And then there is another reason: steering currents. These are the upper-level winds that guide hurricanes across the map, like invisible hands. Over the ocean, these currents tend to be more consistent, but near land, they can become more complex, interrupted by the shape of the coastline, the presence of mountains or pressure systems inland. Sometimes, a storm slows simply because the winds guiding it weaken. It stalls, hovering near the shore, caught between systems. All of this leads to a strange paradox. Though we often imagine hurricanes rushing toward land with unstoppable force, many of them slow down as they approach, as if reluctant to leave the open sea. This slowing doesn't mean the storm disappears. It still carries wind and rain and cloud, but it begins to unwind, to falter. Tonight, we float with that slowing motion. No rush, no fear, just the gentle pull of science and story. So next time you hear of a storm hovering off the coast, remember this: it's not always a sign of strength. Sometimes it's the beginning of the end. The land is whispering back now, quietly unraveling the storm's momentum, and we are simply watching. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we drift toward the sea, a vast, breathing cradle where storms are born and fed. Here, in the open waters, far from the pull of land, a hurricane finds its rhythm. And like all rhythms, it has a heartbeat. The ocean is not just a backdrop. It is the source, the sustainer, the steady pulse beneath the storm. Picture it now. Endless blue stretching in all directions, warm and deep. The surface shimmers in the fading light, but just beneath, something stirs. Heat, moisture, energy, rising like a breath into the waiting sky. This is where our hurricane begins. Tropical cyclones, as meteorologists call them, form only over warm seas, usually when the surface temperature reaches at least 26.5 degrees Celsius, or around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That warmth doesn't just sit on the surface, it extends down, often several dozen meters deep, fueling the storm with a rich reservoir of thermal energy. As the water evaporates, it rises into the atmosphere. That moist air cools, condenses, and forms clouds. And with each cloud that builds, with each drop that falls, energy is released, gently feeding the spiral, strengthening the storm's core. It's not a violent process, not at first. It's almost like breathing. Inhale, warm, moist air ascends. Exhale, clouds bloom and rain drifts down. The cycle repeats, over and over, like a heartbeat echoing across the sea. The further the storm remains from land, the more freely it spins. No obstacles, no interference, just open water and rising heat. The winds tighten, the eye clears, the pressure falls. The heartbeat grows stronger, steadier. You can imagine it now, can't you? A vast circle of clouds, viewed from above, a graceful, slow-moving wheel turning over the sea. It's not a creature of chaos, but of balance. Heat feeds motion, motion shapes clouds, and the ocean gives, patiently and without pause. But as the storm begins to near land, something begins to change. The ocean's warmth starts to thin out. Shallow coastal waters often mix more easily, losing their heat, and the presence of cooler currents near shore can dull the fire that once powered the storm. The heartbeat, though still present, begins to soften. It's not an abrupt change. The storm may still appear strong, still carry rain and wind and waves, but deep inside, where the warm air once surged freely upward, the flow begins to weaken. Even the most powerful hurricane depends on the gentle, invisible work of evaporation and condensation. Take away the warmth, and the engine slows. The spiral falters. The cloud tops lose their lofty glow. And so, as we rest here together, let us feel that transition, not as loss, but as a quiet turning of the page. The storm, like all living things, must one day release its strength, and the ocean, ever generous, steps back. Tonight, the sea is calm once more. The air is heavy with salt and mist. Somewhere, far from here, the last whispers of a storm are fading into cloud. We listen, we breathe. The ocean's heartbeat grows quiet. Hello again, peaceful traveler. As our journey continues, we leave the ocean's gentle hum behind and step softly onto the edge of land, where something new awaits. Resistance, but not the kind that clashes or collides. This is a quiet kind of resistance, a soft push against the spinning wind, a slowing hand from the earth itself. Tonight, we explore friction, the invisible touch that land offers when a hurricane approaches. It doesn't shout, it doesn't shove, it simply resists. Imagine the hurricane again, a swirling circle of wind and cloud, moving confidently over the smooth sea. Out there, there's nothing to hold it back. The ocean gives no real resistance. Its surface flows and shifts, offering little challenge to the storm's motion. But land is different. Land has texture. It has trees and grasses, hills and valleys, cities made of concrete and glass, forests reaching toward the sky. Every bump, every building, every branch disrupts the flow of air just a little, and all together they act like soft fingers brushing against a spinning top. The result? The storm begins to slow, not all at once, not with violence, but gently, persistently. Meteorologists call this surface friction. It occurs in the boundary layer, the lowest part of the atmosphere where the storm meets the earth. As the hurricane's winds touch down on roads, rooftops, and roots, their perfect spiral begins to tangle. The smooth flow becomes bumpy. The winds don't vanish. but they lose their rhythm. It's a bit like music falling slightly out of tempo, still moving, still beautiful, but no longer as strong. At the same time, this disruption has another effect. The inner core of the storm, once so tightly wound, starts to loosen. The eye becomes less defined. The bands of rain spread outward. The energy begins to dissipate, like steam rising from a cooling cup of tea. And still, the land pushes back, not with force, but with texture. You might not think of a pine forest or a grassy dune as a force of resistance. But to a storm, even a single tree creates drag. A field of corn becomes a barrier. A neighborhood, with its rooftops and hedges, becomes a maze the wind must navigate. Even gentle hills and riverbanks alter the wind's path. They turn what was once a uniform spiral into a complicated flow, twisting, splitting, rising and falling. This is not a battle. It's a soft negotiation, and just as the storm once fed on the sea's warmth, it now begins to yield to the Earth's quiet structure. As you rest here with me, think of the land not as something hard or harsh, but as something grounded, steady. Its strength is not in motion, but in stillness. And that stillness, in the end, is what slows the storm. So we return to calm. The winds have weakened, the clouds have softened, the hurricane's voice grows faint, and the earth, ever patient, ever firm, continues to hold. Welcome back, peaceful listener. Tonight, we drift deeper into the subtle stories that unfold when a hurricane approaches land, not with a crash, but with quiet changes that unravel its power from within. This time, we follow a gentle guest that arrives from the shore, dry air. You might imagine a hurricane as a great churning bowl of rain clouds, all mist and moisture, humming with energy from the warm sea below. And you'd be right. Moist air is the fuel that keeps a storm alive. The more it rises and condenses into cloud and rain, the more power the system holds. But land is drier, especially when compared to the lush, moist atmosphere over the ocean. As the hurricane brushes against the coast, fingers of dry air begin to stretch into its spiral. They slip between the rain bands and sneak into the core, not with force, but with quiet disruption. Like cold tea poured gently into a warm cup, they change the flavor of the storm. Dry air doesn't energize, it disrupts. It rises, but it doesn't condense. It doesn't feed the clouds or help them grow. Instead, it dilutes them like ink spreading in water, but slowly fading. When dry air finds its way into the storm's core, it begins to weaken the engine. The moist, rising currents that once spiraled upward start to collapse. Rain bands become less organized. Pockets of the storm begin to unravel. This isn't a violent collapse. It's a soft drifting apart, like a tightly woven braid slowly loosening in the breeze. And that's why dry air is such a powerful, quiet force. It doesn't scream, it doesn't crash, it simply interrupts. Meteorologists call this entrainment, the drawing in of dry air from outside the storm into its moist interior. It's a quiet kind of sabotage, one that plays out over hours, sometimes even days, as the hurricane structure begins to falter. The rain weakens, the clouds thin, the storm, once tightly coiled, becomes patchy and unsure. Even the sound changes. Where there was once a constant rhythm of falling rain, now there is space between drops. A pause between gusts. The atmosphere has begun to exhale. So tonight, let's sit with that image, the storm not being stopped, but being softened. Dry air doesn't destroy, it calms. It interrupts just enough to let the system unwind. There's something comforting about that, isn't there? The idea that not all resistance has to be loud, that something as simple and unseen as dry air can gently shift the path of a storm. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the quiet fingers of dry wind weaving into the storm's wet spiral, not to harm it, but to cool it, to settle it, to whisper, it's time to rest. And so, the storm listens. And we do too. Hello again, dreamer. Tonight, we float gently into the very heart of the hurricane. The eye, calm, still. A circle of peace within a spiral of motion. The eye is the most mysterious part of a hurricane, and perhaps the most beautiful. From space, it looks like a perfect center, a clear dot surrounded by clouds that spin like a great pinwheel. From within, it can feel almost otherworldly. The sky might open above, blue or hazy. The winds go quiet. The rain stops. It is a moment of pause inside, the storm's breath. But as the hurricane nears land, even this calm begins to shift. The eye, once steady and centered, starts to wobble. Why? It's because the eye is not just a calm space, it's a carefully balanced structure. Around it swirls the eye wall, the most intense part of the storm, where wind and rain are strongest. The eye only exists because the eye wall wraps around it in perfect symmetry, spinning fast and tight. But near land, the balance changes. Friction from hills and cities slows one side of the eye wall more than the other. Dry air sneaks in and weakens a section of cloud. The ocean's warm pulse fades, and so the eye begins to drift. It wobbles, like a spinning top losing its balance. It might even split briefly into two, or become ragged, misshapen, off-center. This doesn't mean the storm is collapsing, but it does mean the core is changing. Inside the eye, the once clear skies may grow hazy. Winds may return in uncertain directions. The pressure at the center begins to rise ever so slightly. The delicate piece becomes unstable. Still, it's not a frightening thing. It's simply nature adjusting. Imagine being there, within that drifting center. You look around and feel the stillness, but sense something is different. The hush is thinner now. The silence holds movement at its edge. Meteorologists sometimes call this the eye's disruption. It happens when the storm's core starts to weaken or shift. And when it does, the storm becomes less organized, less able to maintain its power. But even now, the eye remains a soft place to explore. We are not racing through radar scans or dissecting storm data tonight. We are floating, observing, letting the science unfold like mist across a window. And as the eye wobbles, we drift with it. A little off balance, a little uncertain, but always gentle. Because, even in disruption, there is grace. And soon, the storm will pass. Welcome, dreamer. Tonight, we wander with the winds, tracing the slow steps of a storm as it approaches the edge of land. Not the wind's fury, not its howl, but the way its motion slows. You see, hurricanes don't just lose strength as they near land, they also lose speed. Not the spinning wind inside the storm, but the way the storm itself moves across the map. Its forward motion, its gentle glide across the sea, begins to hesitate. Imagine a dancer crossing an empty stage. Their movements are fluid, swift, unimpeded, but now they approach a crowded room where each step requires thought, adjustment, care. They pause, they slow. Their rhythm becomes more cautious, more graceful. So it is with hurricanes. Over open ocean, the path is guided by great flows of air, broad currents in the upper atmosphere called steering winds. These invisible rivers in the sky push the storm gently along, like a boat on a wide, calm stream. The storm obeys, drifting wherever those currents lead. But near land, that flow is no longer so simple. The air currents change shape, terrain rises, atmospheric patterns grow more complicated. Sometimes the steering winds weaken, other times they split or diverge, and the storm, now unsure of where to go, begins to slow. It is not resistance from the ground that slows it, but a loss of guidance, a pause in the flow. Meteorologists measure this in terms of forward speed, how many miles or kilometers the storm travels per hour. Some storms over the ocean move quickly, 15 to 20 miles per hour or more. But as they reach land, they may drop to a crawl, 5 miles per hour, sometimes even less. To you and me, this slowing might feel subtle, but to the storm, it is everything. A shift in pace, a change in rhythm. And yet, there is beauty here. The sky becomes more reflective, almost thoughtful. The spiral turns, but the journey halts. Clouds gather, unsure of where to go. The motion, once steady and purposeful, becomes slow and winding, almost hesitant. From above, it looks as though the hurricane is pausing to take in the view, to consider its next move, or perhaps to rest. Sometimes, a storm may stall entirely, hovering near the coast, caught between currents, waiting for the next breeze to nudge it forward. There is no urgency here, no rush, just the gentle deceleration of a traveler nearing the end of a long journey. And so, as we lie here tonight, let us rest with the storm in its slowness. Feel the pause, the drift, the way nature eases itself into new terrain, not with speed, but with care. The winds still spiral, but the storm moves slower, and we too slow down with it. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we walk softly across the land, not to escape the storm, but to meet the quiet hand that shapes it. A hand not made of muscle or might, but of terrain, the gentle curves and contours of the earth itself. Hurricanes may seem mighty, sweeping across oceans and skies. But when they meet the surface of the land, even the softest rise in elevation can whisper a change into their path. Mountains, valleys, hills, forests. These are not passive features. They are sculptors of wind. Imagine standing on a hilltop as a breeze approaches. You feel it rush toward you, then lift, split, or swirl as it moves around the rise. The same happens on a larger scale with a storm. A mountain range doesn't block a hurricane like a wall. Instead, it nudges the wind upward. The air is forced to rise, cools as it ascends, and forms new clouds. Sometimes, the rising disrupts the storm's structure, tilting it slightly off balance. The eye might shift, the bands may stretch or twist. Valleys do something else. They act like quiet corridors, channeling the wind, steering it along narrow paths. A storm that brushes a valley may turn ever so slightly, following the terrain as if led by invisible fingers. Even forests have their role. From above, they may look like a green blur, but to the wind, they are full of resistance, leaves, branches, trunks, all working in unison to slow and soften the storm's breath, not stopping it, just reshaping it, smoothing its edges. And then there are coastlines, those jagged, winding borders between land and sea. Some curve inward like a cradle. Others jut out like peninsulas. Each one subtly alters the way air flows into and around a storm. One shape might pull the system inland. Another might send it skimming sideways along the shore. These aren't dramatic changes. They're delicate ones, subtle redirections, quiet influences. And so, the storm dances not alone, but with the land itself. Meteorologists watch these interactions closely. They know that a ridge or forest line can shift a storm's track by miles, that a tall hill can tilt the clouds, that even a change in soil moisture can affect how a storm breathes. But tonight, we're not analyzing, we're imagining. We're floating above a vast landscape, watching how the wind flows around each hill, how the rain pools in each valley, how the trees bend and guide the air like conductors of an invisible symphony. The earth is not resisting, it's shaping, and the storm, in turn, listens. So as you close your eyes tonight, imagine the land beneath your own home, its shape, its curves, its quiet strength, and know that even the smallest hill has a voice in the great conversation between wind and world. The terrain's hand is hidden, but it is always there, guiding. Hello again, gentle friend. Tonight, we lift our gaze higher than the clouds, higher than the storm itself, into the delicate upper layers of the atmosphere. Here, in these lofty, quiet corridors, something soft and invisible brushes against the crown of the storm. It is called wind shear, but don't let the name mislead you. While it may sound like something abrupt or harsh, wind shear is often more subtle than that. Picture a feather moving through still air, barely disturbing the silence, yet changing the shape of everything it touches. A hurricane is a vertical structure, from the surface of the ocean all the way up to the chilly heights of the troposphere. It stretches like a great spinning tower of clouds and wind. For a storm to remain strong, this tall tower must stay upright, aligned, steady in its spin. But wind shear, those winds moving in a different direction or speed higher up, can tilt the tower. They don't crash into the storm or rip it apart. Instead, they brush across the top of the system, tugging gently at the spiral's peak. Like fingers running through a swirl of smoke, they stretch and lean the clouds, disrupting the storm's perfect balance. The result? The hurricane's core begins to tilt. The rising motion becomes skewed. The warm air no longer flows smoothly into the center. The storm, still spinning, begins to lose its focus. This gentle tearing effect slows the storm's growth, weakens its breath, softens its symmetry. It's important to remember, wind shear doesn't stop a storm, it complicates it. Like a song slightly out of tune, still moving, still beautiful, but no longer in harmony. Meteorologists often watch for wind shear near land. As hurricanes approach the coast, the upper-level winds sometimes grow stronger, especially if the jet stream is nearby. These winds, high above where we walk and breathe, offer a kind of invisible guidance. Sometimes a gentle nudge, sometimes a quiet resistance. And so, tonight, we imagine that layer of air, not as a threat, but as a soft sculptor, the atmosphere shaping the storm from above. Perhaps you felt this before, on a high hill, or during a moment of quiet before a change in weather. A breeze, gentle but insistent, moving across the tops of trees while the ground below remains still. That's what wind shear does to a hurricane. It brushes the spiral's crown. Softly, gently, persistently, the storm feels it, and it slows. So let your breath match that rhythm now. A gentle inhale, a quiet exhale. Let the upper winds carry your thoughts far above the clouds, where they can drift freely in the quiet sculpting currents. The spiral still turns below, but the crown has been touched, and we, together, float just above it. Welcome back, dreamer. Tonight, we pause to reflect, not in alarm, but in gentle clarification. As we've seen, hurricanes often slow down as they near land. They lose strength, lose speed, and begin to unravel. But slower doesn't always mean safer. Let's explore why, softly and with care. When a storm slows its forward motion, it lingers. It stays in one place longer than it might have otherwise. And while the winds may weaken, the rain does not always follow suit. Imagine a sponge held under a steady stream of water. If you pass it through quickly, it soaks a little, but hold it there, motionless, and it drips, overflows, spills. That is what can happen when a hurricane stalls near land. The rain bands, once spiraling swiftly past, begin to hover. They circle and return, again and again, over the same towns, the same rivers, the same homes. Drops that might have fallen across 100 miles now fall upon one place. Patiently, persistently, and slowly, water begins to rise. This is how flooding becomes the quiet companion of a slow-moving storm. Not with drama, not with thunder, but with the steady, soft rhythm of falling rain, hour after hour, sometimes day after day. It is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to teach us the complexity of nature. A weaker storm may bring less wind, yes, but if it stays too long, it can bring more rain than one that hurried by in a rush. And there is another detail, one just as important. The human response often mirrors the storm's motion. When a system slows, people may assume they have more time, that the danger is passing. But the truth is, the longer a storm lingers, the more uncertainty there is in its path, its pace, and its behavior. So tonight, we whisper this reminder, gently and with love. Slowness is not always softness. Sometimes it is stillness with weight, stillness with consequence. But even that has a place in our understanding of weather's poetry. Not everything that moves slowly is harmless, and not everything that moves quickly is to be feared. Nature has its own rhythm, its own balance, its own stories to tell, and we are here to listen. So, if you ever watch a storm and see it pause, if the winds ease, but the skies remain grey, know that something still lingers, not in a way that rushes us, but in a way that calls for presence, attention, care. And tonight, we bring no urgency, only insight, only stillness. The rain falls softly, the clouds hold their shape, and time stretches like a quiet breath in the night. Welcome back, gentle soul. Tonight, we slow our steps even more. The storm has nearly stopped. Its winds still whisper, but its forward motion has become a crawl. And now, the rain begins to settle. This is a chapter about stillness, about rain that no longer passes by, but stays. When a hurricane lingers, when it slows near land, the rain no longer falls in passing. It rests in place. Drop after drop, hour after hour, it collects not with fury, but with quiet certainty. Imagine it now, a grey sky unmoving, curtains of rain sliding down slowly, not with violence, but with devotion. The air is soft. The landscape breathes beneath it. The clouds do not rush. They simply remain. Raindrops find the earth and linger. Some nestle into leaves, some glide down window panes, some pool on pavement or grass. The ground darkens, sponge-like. Soil welcomes the water until it can hold no more. And then, the water begins to rise. This is not the flash of a summer storm, or the quick burst of a passing shower. This is rain with nowhere else to go. It gathers in fields. It finds the gentle slope of the land and follows it. It fills ditches, creeks, and low places. Roads fade under shallow streams. Gardens become ponds. And still, it falls. When meteorologists speak of this kind of rain, they often use words like training, where bands of precipitation follow one another, like cars on a track. Over and over, they pass across the same places, leaving behind not just puddles, but presence. But here, in our quiet space together, we don't need terms or charts. We only need to listen, to feel, to imagine the rhythm of rainfall as a steady heartbeat, a soft percussion against rooftops and leaves, a lullaby from the sky. The storm, by slowing, becomes more intimate. Its winds may have faded, but its rain becomes a constant companion. And so, the landscape learns to wait, to accept the water, to soften beneath it. Nature bends to the rhythm of a stalled storm. Rivers rise, roots stretch, and tiny streams awaken. There's a quiet beauty in it, a dreamy surrender. The earth holds the rain as it rests, and we, listening here together, do the same. We hold space for slowness, for soaking, for stillness, for weather that does not pass by but settles in. The rain doesn't need to rush, and neither do we. Hello again, gentle traveler. Tonight, we step softly into a story, one not of storm and rage, but of pause. A real storm, a true event, yet told here with care, with reverence, and with calm. This is the tale of Hurricane Harvey. In August of 2017, Harvey spun its way across the Gulf of Mexico. It was powerful, yes, but its greatest impact came not from the winds, but from the way it simply stayed. Harvey made landfall in Texas and then paused. It slowed, then stalled, then nearly stopped. It hovered for days, and with that stillness came rain, not a downpour and then blue skies, but a continuous, steady, soaking rain that fell across Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur, and the many quiet places in between. It rained so long that streets turned to streams, streams to rivers, rivers to inland seas. But let's slow down too. Let's walk through it gently. Imagine a quiet neighborhood just after dusk. The air is thick with mist. Raindrops ripple across driveways. Streetlights glow through the haze. The sky never clears. It simply dims, then brightens, then dims again as the hours pass. And still, Harvey lingers. The clouds never hurry. The storm doesn't roar or dash forward. It waits, it sighs, it stays. From above, satellite images showed a system barely moving, the spiral no longer marching inland, but curled in on itself, looping near the Gulf, drawing moisture from the sea and placing it gently onto the land. It was this staying that defined Harvey. Over 50 inches of rain fell in some areas, a record amount. Not because of how fast the storm moved, but because of how slowly it didn't. And yet, here in our quiet space, we don't focus on the hardship. We honor the stillness, the way the atmosphere, when paused, reveals something ancient, something powerful in its patience. Harvey was a storm that sat, that waited, that taught meteorologists and residents alike that sometimes the greatest force is not movement, but persistence. And from that stillness came new understandings of flooding, of preparation, of how the climate may shift, and how we must listen more closely to what storms can teach us, not just in noise, but in quiet. Tonight, we remember Harvey not as a warning, but as a whisper, a reminder of what rain can become when time stretches, a storm that stayed, a sky that wept, endlessly and soft, and a landscape that held that weight with grace. Now, as you rest, imagine that storm fading. The rain lightens, the clouds thin, the air clears slowly, and the earth begins to exhale. Harvey moved on, eventually, and so shall we. Welcome back, gentle soul. Tonight, we drift down to the surface of the earth, not to the sky, not to the sea, but to the ground beneath our feet, to the quiet, waiting land, and the way it responds to a lingering storm. A slow-moving hurricane brings more than wind. It brings days of rain, soft, constant, and unrelenting. The clouds don't rush. The sky doesn't clear. The water falls steadily, hour after hour, and the earth listens. And then it begins to drink. The first drops soak easily into the topsoil, where roots and mosses and grains of sand open themselves to the sky. The earth is always thirsty in the beginning. Fields, gardens, meadows, they welcome the rain like an old friend. The droplets fall gently through blades of grass, into flower beds, and down into burrows and tunnels carved by worms and roots. But soon the soil becomes full. Every sponge has its limit, and the earth too must begin to let go. Water, now with nowhere to soak, begins to move. It glides across the surface in thin sheets, barely visible at first. It follows the gentle slope of the land, down hillsides, across fields, along the natural lines carved by time and gravity. And as it moves, it gathers. A drop becomes a trickle becomes a stream, and the streams, those quiet threads of silver, begin to join. Rivers, once calm, begin to rise. Beneath the surface, aquifers swell. Water pools in hidden places. Low-lying land becomes dappled with reflections. Puddles stretch wider. Ditches brim. And all the while, the rain continues. Not fierce. Not thunderous. Just steady. The land absorbs what it can. But when the storm slows and the clouds linger, there is too much water for the earth to hold. Floodplains begin to fill. Those ancient basins, carved by time and memory, designed by nature to carry overflow. And though they may seem dormant most days, they remember. They rise with grace. Wetlands awaken. Marshes extend their reach. The grasses wave gently beneath a shallow tide of sky-fallen water. The earth does not panic. It adjusts. And in that adjustment is a kind of beauty, a surrender to nature's rhythm, a willingness to receive. In some places, the ground gives way, softening into mud, yielding beneath quiet weight. In others, trees stretch their roots deeper, holding firm as the soil loosens. And you, listener, are here with me, witnessing this quiet response. The soft give of the land, the rise of rivers, the slow exhale of soil that has taken in too much. It is not a drama, it is a meditation, and just as the earth softens and rises, so do we. We learn to listen, to receive, to yield. The land doesn't fight the rain, it welcomes, absorbs, releases. So tonight, rest with the earth. Let yourself absorb the stillness, the slowness, and let it rise within you gently. Welcome, dreamer. Tonight, we drift not through forests or fields, but through cities, streets and sidewalks, rooftops and rain gutters, the human landscape, shaped not by roots and soil, but by concrete and glass. When rain falls on the natural world, it soaks, but in cities, it runs. This chapter is about runoff, the quiet choreography of rain upon the modern world. Picture it now, a quiet evening in a sleeping city. Rain taps gently on windows. Streetlights glow golden against the mist. Pavement glistens, and beneath it all, water moves. Unlike forests, cities cannot absorb. Their surfaces are hard, sealed with asphalt, lined with stone, edged with metal. And so, the rain is not welcomed in. It is redirected. Each raindrop that lands on a rooftop begins a journey. It rolls across shingles, down into gutters, through pipes, and into storm drains. The water doesn't pause, it flows. Sidewalks shimmer as water dances across them. Streets glisten with shallow streams. Curbs guide the flow like miniature rivers, winding between parked cars and planters. This is the city's version of a watershed, and while it is efficient, it is not soft. Because there is little absorption, the rain moves faster. Runoff gathers quickly. Storm drains fill. Basins swell. The water, unable to rest in the soil, searches for another path. Sometimes it finds one. Sometimes it pools. Urban flooding doesn't come with thunderclaps. It comes with stillness, with water rising slowly up, driveways, with parking lots turning into lakes, with intersections becoming gentle crossroads of reflection. In this world of right angles and rigid surfaces, rain becomes something that must be managed, not received. Still, there is beauty. There's a quiet kind of music in the way droplets race down a fire escape, in the way puddles ripple with traffic lights, in the hush that settles over a city softened by cloud. And beneath the surface, beneath grates and covers and brick-laid alleys, water follows its own script. Pipes carry it away, far from where it fell. Stormwater systems built long ago, now holding the sky. Some cities are learning to blend old with new, to invite water in again. Green roofs, permeable pavement, rain gardens nestled between buildings. Little places where the city remembers the land it once covered. But still, for now, most rain in urban spaces does not stay. It flows, and flows, and flows. And so, tonight, we follow it. We imagine every drop not as a problem, but as a traveler, moving softly through our built world, seeking stillness. And just like that water, we too move slowly toward rest. The city breathes, the rain glides, and all is quiet. Welcome back, dear one. Tonight, we follow the storm inland, not as a force, but as a fading dancer, a presence once powerful, now softening with every step. A hurricane begins over water, spinning with elegance, tightly wound and full of energy drawn from the sea's warm breath. But as it crosses the shoreline, something begins to change. Its spiral loosens, its rhythm falters, and its body begins a slow, graceful unraveling. We are here to witness that transition, not in haste, but in wonder. Picture the storm from above, like a great ribbon turning over the earth. Over the ocean, it spins with purpose. Clouds curve in arcs. Rain bands reach out like flowing arms. But as it moves inland, its symmetry begins to fade. The core of the storm, once a precise circle, softens. It's like watching a dancer unspool a long ribbon in the wind. Beautiful, even in disarray. This is not collapse. It is transformation. The land is different. It does not feed the storm the way the ocean does. The heat is weaker. The moisture is less abundant. And the surface, uneven and textured, begins to interrupt the storm's steps. Each hill, each tree, each town below becomes a quiet partner in the dance, gently pulling at the storm's form. The flow is no longer smooth. The spirals begin to tangle. Clouds break. The eye loses definition. The wind, still present, now drifts in less organized paths, swirling in bursts, rushing down valleys, brushing across forests with less intention. But even in this, there is elegance. The storm doesn't end abruptly. It fades in slow motion, like the last notes of a song stretching into silence. Somewhere, rain is still falling, lightly now, scattered. Somewhere, wind still curls around a bend. But the storm's body has grown wide and less certain. Its heart is no longer beating with the pulse of the ocean. And yet, even in its unraveling, it tells a story. It is a journey inward, just like us, from the vastness of the sea, across the threshold of land, into the quiet places where things settle and soften. A journey from strength to stillness, from motion to memory. As we rest tonight, let us follow the storm as it steps softly inland. Let us walk with it, not in fear, but in reverence. Let us feel the slow unwinding of its spiral. And let us remember that even as it changes, it is still beautiful. The storm journeys inward, and so do we. Hello again, quiet soul. Tonight, we explore a feeling, a gentle echo held in the heart of a fading storm. Though it now moves over land, the hurricane carries with it the memory of the sea. It no longer draws energy from warm waves or rising steam. But for a while, it remembers. It remembers the taste of salt in the air. It remembers the rhythm of evaporation and condensation. It remembers how to spin. Even as it weakens, the storm continues to breathe with the ocean's pulse. You can still see it in the sky, the way the clouds curve ever so slightly, like a spiral forgotten in the wind. You can still feel it in the breeze, a gentle curl, a hidden echo of structure. The rain still falls in bands, the winds still gust in waves, but the energy now is borrowed, residual, a ghost of what was. This is the storm's memory, a lingering presence shaped by water and wind, now fading but not yet gone. The atmosphere holds on to this memory like a lullaby. Moisture still floats in the air. Humidity clings to the trees. The clouds hang low, slow to lift. The ground is wet, the rivers full. Even the birds are quiet, as though listening for something that has already passed. It is a soft haunting, not of fear, but of remembrance. In meteorological terms, this is the decay phase. But that word feels too final, too sharp. What's really happening is more like reflection. The storm is winding down, but gently. It becomes scattered showers, light breezes, wisps of cloud over hills and lakes. It leaves behind no roar, only mist and moisture and silence. And still, the ocean lingers in its breath. Sometimes, parts of the storm's core survive long after landfall, traveling hundreds of miles inland, carried by currents in the upper atmosphere. Not strong, not dangerous, just present, just remembering, and we remember too, that every storm once had a beginning, a warm wave, a rising wind, a heartbeat over the sea. And now, even far from the coast, the sky still holds that story. The storm becomes part of the land's rhythm. It slows, it quiets, it sighs, and with it, we do the same. As you rest tonight, feel that gentle echo, the memory of movement, now still, the touch of water, now air, the hush of wind, now sleep. The storm may be gone, but the ocean still whispers through its breath, and the sky remembers. Welcome back, gentle traveler. Tonight, we drift upward, not into the heart of the storm, but above it, into the vast, invisible realm where air moves like oceans, where currents of wind, layers of pressure, and sweeping forces shape the path of every storm. And sometimes, those forces press pause. We've seen how a hurricane can slow, but now we ask softly, why do some storms stall completely? The answer, as always, lies in the sky. High above the earth, the atmosphere flows in rivers of air, broad, powerful streams that guide storms across the sea and land. These are the steering currents. They are not visible to the eye, but they are real, quiet hands shaping the storm's journey. When those steering winds are strong, the hurricane moves along with them, sweeping steadily across the map. But sometimes, those winds weaken. Sometimes, they vanish, and the storm is left with no direction, no momentum, just stillness. Imagine standing in a slow river. The current carries you gently forward, but then the water stills. The flow stops. You are suspended, hovering in place. That's what happens when a storm stalls. One of the most common reasons is something called a blocking pattern, a high pressure system that settles near the hurricane and holds it in place. High pressure doesn't push. It presses, softly, firmly, like a hand resting on the storm's shoulder. You might picture it like a finger on a spinning top, slowing its drift without stopping the spin. The hurricane continues to swirl, to breathe, to rain, but it no longer moves forward. There are many shapes to these atmospheric blocks. Sometimes it's a ridge of high pressure, arcing like a dome over the land. Other times, it's the absence of wind itself, a stillness in the upper air that leaves the storm with nowhere to go. These patterns can last for days. The sky, in its own rhythm, decides when to resume, and so the storm waits, still spinning, still raining, still present, but unmoving. To meteorologists, these moments are meaningful. A stalling hurricane can bring extended rain, prolonged wind, and deeper effects on the land it hovers over. But here, in our quiet space, we observe with gentleness. No alarms, just awareness. It is not the storm's will to stay. It is the sky's lull, a pause in the great breath of the atmosphere. And so, we let it linger. The currents will return eventually. The steering winds will shift. The storm will continue its path. But until then, it rests. And we rest too, floating above the clouds, listening to the stillness, feeling the hush of motion paused. The atmosphere presses pause, and we simply watch. Hello again, soft soul. Tonight, we drift across the globe, not in haste, but in quiet exploration. We follow the path of storms, not just where they go, but where they stop, where they hesitate, where they seem to linger, like a sigh. There are places on Earth where hurricanes pause more often, not because they choose to, but because the sky above them is shaped in a certain way, patterns of air, warmth, and geography that invite the storm to stay a while. Let's visit them gently, naming each as if from a dream. The Gulf Coast of the United States, a warm, shallow sea, wide and slow to change. The Gulf of Mexico is a frequent cradle for tropical storms, and along the coasts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, the storms sometimes stall. Why? Because the steering currents here can weaken, especially in late summer. High-pressure domes can build over the central US, blocking the storm's path inland. And so, the hurricane lingers. Rainfall deepens. The sea and sky hold their breath. Southeast Asia. In places like the Philippines, Vietnam, and southern China, tropical cyclones, called typhoons in this region, can also slow. The warm waters of the South China Sea, the seasonal monsoon flows, and the shape of the nearby mountains and islands can all influence a storm's movement. Sometimes, the storm makes landfall and pauses just offshore. Sometimes, it weaves back and forth, caught in the tender tug of opposing winds. The Western Pacific, Japan, Taiwan, the coasts of eastern China. These regions see frequent storms that drift slowly, pressed between high-pressure systems or stalled by weak guiding winds. Some typhoons move in loops, some stay in place for days, swirling softly over warm seas. The Caribbean and Central America, small islands, narrow channels, surrounded by ocean warmth. Here, hurricanes may pause between steering flows, caught in a moment of stillness as they transition from sea to land, or wait for the next current to guide them. Off the east coast of the US, sometimes a hurricane moves northward, only to be blocked by high pressure to the east. It lingers offshore. Rain brushes the beaches. Winds reach inland. The storm, like a traveler unsure of which road to take, hovers in place. Each of these places has a rhythm, a pattern, a seasonal breath that shapes the way storms behave. And while the science behind it is real and studied, We tell it here like a lullaby, not to warn, just to notice. These regions are not cursed or chosen. They are simply places where the sky sometimes pauses, where the ocean holds warmth, where the winds take their time, and so the storms take their time too. As you rest tonight, imagine those places not as maps, but as gentle corners of the world where weather slows, where the sky kneels, where clouds hover like birds on still air. The Gulf Coast, the South China Sea, the Caribbean, the quiet waters off Japan, all places where hurricanes whisper before they move on. And now, so do we. Welcome back, dreamer. Tonight, we drift once more to the sea, not the surface, but deeper, into the flowing rhythm beneath the waves, into the hidden pulse of the ocean. This chapter is about something quiet but powerful, something that doesn't roar or rise, but moves in deep circles, shaping the breath of storms above. It's called the loop current. The loop current is a warm river within the Gulf of Mexico, not a river of land and banks, but of ocean water. It enters from the Caribbean, flows northward into the Gulf, curls back on itself like a ribbon, and then escapes through the Florida Straits, becoming the beginning of the Gulf Stream. It's not always the same shape. Sometimes it's tight and coiled. Other times it stretches far north, brushing close to the US coastline. But no matter the shape, it carries heat, deep, sustained warmth from the tropics. And hurricanes feel it. Above, a storm may look like clouds and wind, but what powers it, what feeds it, is warmth, especially warmth that lingers beneath the surface. That's why the loop current matters. Where the storm passes over this current, it finds not just surface heat, but a thick, generous layer of warm water reaching downward. That depth matters, because even when a hurricane stirs the ocean, mixing surface with deeper water, the warmth remains. There's no sudden cooling to weaken the storm, only more heat rising, and so the storm grows, softly, quietly, steadily. Some of the strongest storms in the Gulf have passed over the loop current just before landfall. It is not a villain, it is not a danger, it is a giver, a quiet river offering energy to the sky. But sometimes the opposite happens. The storm moves away from the loop, or an eddy, a swirling offshoot of the current, breaks off, cooler than the main flow. The warmth becomes patchy, the fuel uneven, and the storm slows. Its structure falters, its strength wanes. Just as the ocean can feed the wind, it can also forget to offer warmth, and the storm must adjust. Tonight, we imagine the loop not as a force, but as a rhythm, a pulse beneath the waves, a heart beating slowly, deep within the sea. Its energy rises silently, invisible to the eye, but essential to the breath of the sky above. The hurricane listens, and so do we. Let your breath mimic that current now. A slow inhale, a gentle turn, a soft exhale, over and over, without end. The ocean flows, the current loops, and the storm, like us, simply follows. Hello again, quiet traveler. Tonight, we lift once more into the sky, into the lofty layers where air moves in streams, turns in silence, and sometimes forgets where it was going. This chapter is about steering currents and what happens when they disappear. Picture a hurricane as a paper boat in a stream. The stream, the flow of air high above, carries it forward, guiding it gently across the water. These winds are what steer the storm. They move slowly, high in the troposphere, shaping the storm's journey like a hand guiding a feather. But sometimes the stream dries up. There is no more current, no forward motion, no path, and the storm drifts. This is what meteorologists call a stalling pattern, caused by atmospheric roadblocks. These roadblocks aren't solid or loud. They are quiet shapes in the air, high-pressure systems that hold their place, creating zones where wind does not move, or low-pressure areas that tug from different directions, confusing the flow. In these moments, the hurricane becomes still, not inside, but in its path. It spins, it rains, it waits. Imagine the sky above as a great map with invisible roads, some straight, some curved. But now the roads have vanished. The sky has no instructions to give. The storm is a dancer with no music, still moving, but without direction. These roadblocks can form for many reasons. Sometimes it's the strength of a high-pressure ridge nearby. Sometimes it's the collapse of the jet stream. Sometimes it's just the natural breathing of the atmosphere, exhaling slowly and forgetting for a while to push. Whatever the reason, the result is always the same. The storm lingers. It may hover offshore, or pause just inland, or loop in place, unsure. And during that time, it brings still weather, not calm, but unmoving, rain that rests, wind that doesn't wander, clouds that seem to have forgotten how to part. In our everyday lives, we may not notice the shape of the air above us, but it's there, always sculpting, always suggesting motion. When it stops, so do the storms. But this is not a moment of fear. It's a moment of reflection, of quiet, of suspended time. So as you rest now, imagine those roadblocks in the sky, not walls, but soft hills of air, pressing gently, holding space, pausing motion. The storm listens, it waits, and in that waiting, it speaks. Still welcome back, soft listener. Tonight, we stay close to land, not in the storm's path, but beside it, like a quiet observer watching a ballet in slow motion. A hurricane, once swirling wide and strong over the open sea, has made its way inland, and now it spins in place, still turning, but slower now. Imagine a great carousel, once gleaming and swift beneath the sun, now moving with the weight of age and rain. Soldier dogs, horses still rise and fall. The music still plays, but everything feels heavier, slower, softer. That's what a hurricane becomes as it settles on land. Though its feet have touched solid ground, its arms still move in circles. Rain bands stretch outward, wrapping around its core like the faded edges of a tapestry. The wind, once fierce and unbroken, now stutters over hills, trees, and rooftops. It is still a spiral, but not as sharp. It leans, it lags, it lingers. And all the while, the rain falls. Not in a rush, but in sheets, in layers, in waves that seem to pulse with the memory of the sea. The storm has slowed, but its purpose remains, to release what it carried across the ocean, to let go. Meteorologists observe this stage carefully. The inner core of the storm may still hold structure, but the eye wall, if it survives, begins to bend. The symmetry weakens, the winds at the center slow, and the once precise circulation spreads outward unevenly. But here, we don't need data, only stillness, only the image of a carousel spinning in the mist with no one aboard, turning not for thrill, but because it remembers how. Sometimes the storm moves just a few miles in an entire day. It swirls over towns and forests, over fields and rivers, its motion less about distance now and more about presence. The spiral still dances, but it does so quietly. We might think of the storm as past its prime, but there's something dignified in this slowness, something graceful in the way it finishes its story with softness. As the winds touch buildings, they whisper instead of roar. As rain reaches windows, It does not lash, it lingers. And we are safe in this moment of witnessing. The storm is not gone, but it is gentle now, spinning slowly on shore. Let that image carry you into rest. Let the rhythm of the storm's turning lull your breath. A carousel in the rain, a spiral in no rush, a story winding down, still spinning, but slower now. Hello again, dear one. Tonight, we honor a moment, a crossing, a quiet threshold between ocean and land, between motion and stillness, between sky and soil. This is the moment of landfall, but not as a flash or a strike. Here, in our story, landfall is something softer, something like a breath. The storm has journeyed far, gathered strength over warm waters, spun itself into a perfect rhythm, travelled on the whisper of steering winds. And now, it arrives, it touches land, and everything changes. Picture it not as a collision, but as an inhale, and then a long, slow exhale. The moment the eye crosses the coastline, the storm releases. The tension of the journey lifts, the air changes, the balance begins to shift. To meteorologists, landfall is a technical point when the center of the storm moves over land. But here, we feel it instead. We feel the way the winds suddenly bend, the way the trees begin to sway differently, the way the birds fall silent, sensing the press of something immense. The coastline receives the storm like open arms, not resisting, but ready. The land does not strike back. It simply absorbs. In that moment, the storm's pulse slows. The roar becomes a hush. The storm, once drawn forward by the sea, now finds friction, resistance, texture. It feels grass, trees, concrete, hills, and it breathes. A long, slowing breath that unravels the tight spiral of its heart. There may still be wind, there may still be rain, but everything feels different, grounded, heavy, homeward. It is a moment that can't be rushed. The storm does not stop, it transitions, like a dancer stepping off stage, like a wave folding gently onto shore, like the moment the tide turns and begins to fall. You may not even notice the exact second landfall happens. The sky doesn't announce it, but the earth feels it. The spiral softens, the rhythm unwinds, and the storm exhales. Tonight, as you rest, let that breath carry you. Let it cradle you in its release. You are not in the eye of the storm, you are beside it, watching, listening, feeling the moment a great force chooses to slow. The breath of landfall, a sigh after a long journey, the sky letting go, and the land welcoming it home. Welcome back, gentle listener. Tonight, we drift toward the edges, not into the heart of the storm, but to the outermost arms that extend far beyond the center, the rain bands. These are not afterthoughts. They are not leftovers. They are ribbons, spirals of cloud and rain that stretch for hundreds of miles. Even as the storm slows, these bands continue to curl outward, sweeping across sky and sea like long threads trailing behind a slow-moving dancer. Let's follow one now. Close your eyes and imagine a distant rain band, far from the storm's center, soft and long, drifting through twilight skies. It forms quietly, born from the humid breath of the ocean, lifted upward by invisible fingers of rising air. From space, it looks like a faint spiral line, almost like a brushstroke on the canvas of the earth. On the ground, it arrives gently, a whisper of wind, a darkening sky. Then, the first soft drops of rain begin to fall. This is not a downpour. This is a rhythm, a pulse. Rain bands rotate around the hurricane's core, but they can form and reform, sometimes lingering in one place for hours, sometimes arriving, departing, and returning again, like waves at the edge of a tide. Within them, bursts of rain fall in intervals. Showers fade to mist, then grow again. Thunder, if present, is distant, muffled by moisture. These are not the storms that chase sleep away. These are the kind that lull it forward. As we walk with the rain band, we notice how it shapes the world below. Trees bow in soft gusts. Leaves tremble. Windows glisten. The sound of traffic hushes as droplets drum a lullaby on rooftops. It's easy to think of the hurricane only as its eye, but in truth, much of what we feel comes from these distant arms. They may carry strong winds at times, but often they are gentle, wandering through rural hills, gliding over city streets, brushing over rivers and fields with damp fingers. And sometimes, in the calmest moments, a break appears between bands. A sudden clearing, a bird chirping, a patch of blue sky between soft grey sheets. But then, the next ribbon returns. Another arm of cloud and moisture, still spinning, still wrapping the storm in its wide, slow dance. Each rainband is a spiral in miniature, a sleepy spiral on the edge of the world. Tonight, we follow just one. We don't rush it. We don't chase it. We let it pass over us, like a dream drifting by. The rain taps, the breeze sways, and the spiral continues, softly. Hello again, peaceful traveler. Tonight, we turn our gaze to the shoreline, not to the wind or the rain, but to the subtle rise and fall of water where sea meets land. This chapter is about tides and how they sometimes meet the slow-moving rhythm of a stalled storm. Tides are the quiet breath of the ocean, rising and falling each day under the gentle pull of the moon and the sun. They are not hurried, not chaotic, just dependable, ebb and flow, like a cosmic lullaby repeating every 12 hours or so. Now imagine a hurricane, moving slowly, perhaps barely moving at all, approaching the coast. The storm brings with it a storm surge, a gentle rise in sea level, lifted by the pressure of the storm's air and the push of its wind. This surge is like a dome of water, carried quietly beneath the eye and the spiral arms. But when the storm moves slowly, when it stalls near the shore, its surge can begin to align with the tide. If the storm's pause matches the moment of high tide, the ocean rises even higher. Two motions overlapping, two rhythms combining. It's like two waves meeting mid-crest, each one small on its own, but together they create something deeper. Slower storms don't always bring the highest surge, but they bring something else: persistence. The water doesn't retreat quickly. It lingers. It stays pressed against the coast. In low-lying places, this union can gently spread the sea across marshes and harbours. It doesn't rush in. It seeps, slowly, thoughtfully. Imagine the shore at dawn, the tide already high, and the sky still covered with storm-spun clouds. The waves lap higher on the sand, a bit more with each hour. Not with violence, but with weight. Boats rise slightly in their moorings. Docks groan quietly. Seagrass disappears under silver sheets of water. And still, the storm holds position offshore. Still, the tide rises. Meteorologists study this interaction closely. They note the times of high tide, measure the projected surge, calculate the compound effect. But here, in our soft space together, we only feel the rhythm. We listen to the slow duet of sky and sea, two breathings in sync, and then the tide begins to fall. The storm may still linger, but the sea starts its retreat. The moon's pull shifts, and the water answers. The rhythm continues, and the world once again breathes out. As you rest tonight, imagine those two forces, storm and tide, moving toward each other in slow motion, meeting, embracing, and then parting again. not in conflict, but in harmony. The water rises, the clouds watch, and the land waits, softly. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we look to the sky again, not to search for threat or thunder, but to watch something beautiful, something quiet, take place in the upper air. We are here to observe the cloud towers of a storm as they slowly soften, tilt, and fade. In the heart of a strong hurricane, the clouds can rise to staggering heights, up to 50,000 feet or more, tall as mountains in the sky. These towering columns of warm, rising air are called cumulonimbus clouds, and they are what give hurricanes their deep structure. They surge upward like breath held in the atmosphere, majestic, tall, alive with motion. But as the storm moves over land, something begins to change. The warmth beneath begins to dwindle. The steady feed of ocean heat, gone. The spiral still turns, but the vertical energy, the upward push, begins to loosen, and high above, the cloud towers begin to tilt, just slightly at first, like flowers nodding in a soft breeze, then more as the storm's internal balance shifts. These are signs of weakening, not of collapse, but of release. The air no longer rises in tight, steady spirals. It wobbles, it spreads. The clouds lean and stretch, pulled by wind shear, no longer protected by the warm cushion of sea air. And soon the towers begin to fade. Not like a fire going out, more like petals closing at dusk, a gentle folding inward. Cloud tops, once icy white and sharp, blur into grey. Edges dissolve into mist. The anvil shapes that once crowned the sky sink lower, blending into layers of stratus and broken cumulus. From the ground, you might look up and feel the difference without needing to name it. The sky feels quieter, softer, less dense. The storm is still there. Rain may still fall. Winds may still stir the trees. But the towering engines of cloud are losing their strength. This is a peaceful unraveling, a letting go. Some towers may briefly rebuild, trying to rise once more. But without the sea's warmth, they struggle to hold shape. They sway, they fall back, and the storm sighs. Meteorologists see this pattern in satellite images. Cloud tops cooling, then warming, a sign of collapse. A sign that the storm, once mighty, is growing tired. But here, we feel it instead. We watch the sky become gentle. We see the clouds bow. We listen to the quiet of a structure unbuilt. Tonight, let yourself become one of those towers. You've risen high, you've held form, but now you are allowed to soften, to tilt, to fade into the surrounding sky, no longer towering, still beautiful, still part of the whole, just quieter now, and ready to rest. Hello again, peaceful soul. Tonight, we explore a gentle mystery in the sky. Why some storms, even with so much space to roam, simply stay in place. They stall, they drift, and sometimes they barely move at all. It begins with something called a blocking ridge. Now, don't let the name disturb your calm. A blocking ridge is not a wall of stone or steel. It is not an enemy to the storm. It is, quite simply, a quiet, high-pressure system in the atmosphere, a place where air sinks rather than rises. It forms high above the earth and settles over a region like an invisible dome. When it does, the air beneath it becomes stable, calm, and resistant to change, and any storm that approaches it slows. Imagine the hurricane as a slow dancer crossing a wide room. The music flows, the movement is smooth, but then an unseen hand touches the shoulder. A pause, a moment of stillness. The dancer waits, unsure where to go next. That is what a blocking ridge does. It holds the storm gently in place. It doesn't push back. It simply says, not yet. The storm spins. It rains. But forward motion stops. These ridges can linger for days. They may form between two larger systems. They may be strengthened by temperature patterns in the upper atmosphere. Sometimes they appear without warning, and sometimes they fade just as softly as they came. From space, the storm looks trapped, circling slowly, wobbling in place, its path unsure. From the ground, it feels endless. Rain falls for hours. Winds shift direction. The sky remains sealed in soft grey. But here, we do not see this as frustration. We see it as nature in deep breath. The ridge above is simply part of the atmosphere's architecture. It shapes the weather without noise, a sculptor of stillness. And sometimes, the stillness lasts. Hurricane Harvey stalled beneath such a ridge. So did Dorian. So have many others. It is not rare. It is not strange. It is the sky's way of pressing pause. And eventually, the winds will shift. The ridge will loosen. The storm will feel the pull again. The current that carries it onward. But until then, it stays, like a whisper waiting to be heard. As you rest tonight, picture that invisible dome above. Not heavy, not hard, but soft as silk stretched across the sky, holding the storm, holding space, not to stop it, just to still it, so the world below may listen, and you, listening now, may drift gently into sleep. Welcome back, gentle listener. Tonight, we look skyward, not toward a single storm, but two spirals in motion, two swirling presences that find themselves near one another in the wide breadth of the atmosphere. This is a chapter about the Fujiwara effect, a quiet choreography that happens when two storms come close. Named after the Japanese meteorologist Sakuhei Fujiwara, this phenomenon is not a crash or a clash. It's a kind of dance, a slow celestial waltz between powerful systems, each spinning with its own rhythm, yet drawn toward the other. Imagine, if you will, two dancers entering a ballroom at the same time. Each has their own steps, their own style. But as they near one another, their motion begins to shift. They feel each other's presence. They begin to move not alone, but together. That's what happens high above. When two cyclones, tropical storms, or hurricanes form within a few hundred miles of each other, their circulations may begin to interact. The atmosphere, full of motion and memory, allows their energy fields to touch. And when they do, something beautiful begins. Each storm begins to orbit the other, slowly, gracefully. They spin around a shared center point, not merging right away, but revolving in tandem. The stronger storm often leads, drawing the weaker one into a wider arc. But sometimes they are evenly matched. Sometimes they merge, becoming one larger storm. Other times they drift apart, never touching fully, just brushing past like dancers, parting after a single graceful turn. And sometimes one fades. The weaker system may be absorbed, its spiral unraveled by the stronger partner, like a ribbon being drawn inward. But here, in our story, there's no tension, no urgency, just motion, just the sky dancing with itself. This isn't common. Not all storms meet this way, but when they do, the Fujiwara effect becomes a quiet performance above the ocean. It may last hours, sometimes longer. Meteorologists track their paths closely, mapping the curve, the loop, the slow drift of storm against storm. But for us, there is no need to follow it closely. We simply imagine it. Two spirals circling each other across a canvas of cloud. No noise, no rush, just a slow spin, a shared moment. And then they part. As you drift towards sleep, let your breath follow their steps. Let your thoughts swirl softly, not in chaos, but in rhythm. You are part of that sky too. Two storms, one dance, and the ocean watching in silence. Hello again, peaceful soul. Tonight, we leave the clouds for a moment and return gently to the ground, to the homes, the towns, the fields that remember. Because when a storm stalls, when it lingers for days, wrapped in silence and rain, it leaves more than puddles and wind. It leaves memory. Not all storms are remembered for their speed or strength. Some are remembered for their stillness, for the way they stayed, for the way time seemed to pause beneath the weight of clouds. Communities remember these storms, not with panic, but with detail. They remember the way the rain fell steadily on rooftops, how the streets slowly disappeared beneath a soft tide of water, how neighbors spoke in quiet tones and the sky never brightened, not even once. In Houston, they remember Harvey, not because of a single moment, but because of many long ones. Days of rain, nights of watching, mornings that arrived without relief. The city became a quiet sea, and the memory remains like a dream, half clouded by mist and reflection. In the Carolinas, they remember Florence, a storm that slowed to a crawl, brushing the coast again and again, its spiral barely moving. And in smaller towns, where names don't make headlines, people remember their own slow storms. A hurricane unnamed, but remembered. Rain that turned to story. Winds that became whispers. It's not the noise they recall, it's the length. The sound of water dripping steadily from gutters. The feeling of walking through ankle-deep silence. The strange hush when birds stopped singing. The way food tasted different in candlelight. These memories are not fearful. They are textured. They are woven into local history, passed between neighbors like shared songs. Remember the week the storm stayed. Remember how the rain never stopped. Remember how we waited. Children hear these stories and grow up watching the sky with different eyes. Not with fear, but with patience. Slow storms ask us to pay attention, to wait, to witness. And so we remember not only the storm, but who we were in its stillness. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, think of those moments not as warnings, but as lullabies. They belong to people who watched the rain fall and kept listening, to families who waited together, to communities that found peace in pause. The storm moves on, but the memory stays, long after the clouds have lifted, long after the ground has dried, like a soft echo in the air, and in that echo we rest. Welcome back, gentle listener. Tonight, we revisit storms not for their wind, not for their roar, but for something softer, for rain. Rain that didn't shout, rain that didn't rush, rain that simply stayed, falling hour after hour, day after day, until it made history, not with noise, but with stillness. This chapter is a meditation on quiet extremes. You may expect weather records to come from sudden bursts, fast winds, sharp gusts, dramatic storms. But some of the most extraordinary numbers in meteorology come from moments that were slow, moments that lingered, storms that seemed in no hurry to pass. They set records not through power, but through presence. Take Hurricane Harvey, for example. When it slowed to a near standstill over southeastern Texas in 2017, it didn't bring the strongest winds, but it brought rainfall beyond measure. Over 60 inches fell in some areas, a once-in-a-thousand-year event. But there were no sirens in that rainfall, no rushing wall of noise, just days of clouds, days of steady water from sky to earth. Neighborhoods turned into reflections. Homes sat in silence as the rain continued, like a single thought repeating itself in nature's mind. Or think of Hurricane Lane, which passed near Hawaii in 2018. It didn't make landfall, but it hovered, spinning slowly offshore, brushing the islands with spiral after spiral of cloud and moisture. Over 50 inches of rain fell on the Big Island. Again, not because of fury, because of linger. These quiet extremes are easy to overlook. The air doesn't howl, the trees don't crack, but time stretches, and the rain begins to leave its mark, not in moments, but in layers. Fields fill, soil swells, rivers forget their edges, and all the while, the world grows quieter, as if listening. Meteorologists measure these records carefully, inches and millimeters, satellite loops, Doppler echoes. But behind every number is a feeling, the sound of water tapping endlessly at windows, the grey of mornings that never brighten, the hush of towns wrapped in mist. And within those quiet records, there is beauty, there's patience, there's rhythm, there's a reminder that nature doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the greatest stories unfold slowly, softly, like this one. So tonight, let us honor those still storms. The ones that did not race through history, but walked. The ones that stayed and soaked. The ones whose names are remembered not with fear, but with awe. Rainfall records, quiet extremes, moments of sky that wouldn't let go. And as you drift to sleep, think of them as lullabies. Water falling from clouds like memory, like breath, and the world listening. Hello again, soft soul. Tonight, we stay in the aftermath. The storm has passed. The eye has moved on. The winds have quieted. The rain has slowed. But something remains. Humidity, a tropical stillness, thick and warm, left behind like the final sigh of a long conversation with the sky. This chapter is about that lingering breath. Even after the clouds begin to part, the air holds memory. The ground, soaked through, releases moisture upward. Trees drip slowly. Pavement glistens. Rivers still run high. And the atmosphere feels heavy. There is no breeze, no chill, only softness, only warmth. Humidity is the part of the storm that doesn't leave right away. It hangs in doorways, clings to skin, steams from rooftops in the morning sun. It's the ghost of the ocean that followed the storm inland. And the body feels it. Clothes stick. Windows fog. The air feels close. And yet, this is not discomfort here. Not in our story. This is a warmth that says, I'm still here. A presence, not a pressure. A reminder of what just passed. Meteorologists call it residual moisture, leftover humidity, that remains long after the last raindrop. It's why tropical air feels so different. The dew points remain high. The air is saturated, as if it too remembers the rainfall, the winds, the breath of the storm. And in this space, this humid afterglow, life begins again. Insects stir, birds sing cautiously, leaves stretch under the weight of water and light. The world exhales, and you can feel it too. Maybe you've stepped outside after a storm and noticed the air feels thick, like honey, like something you could touch. It doesn't rush past, it wraps around, it moves with you. In the tropics, this feeling is familiar. It's not just part of the weather, it's part of the rhythm, part of the pulse. There's something restful in it. The world doesn't leap back to normal. It settles. It breathes in mist. It dries slowly. It listens. So tonight, we linger in that humid air, not as a warning, but as an echo, a softness that stays long after the sky has cleared. The storm is gone, but the warmth remains. And as you rest beneath your own ceiling of cloud or stars, let that warmth wrap you like mist. Let it say, you have passed through something, and now you are still, and now you can rest. Welcome back, quiet traveler. Tonight we rise, not into the wind, not into the rain, but into orbit, high above the earth, where silence holds everything in a slow, endless drift. Here, in this silent place, we float with satellites, our calm observers in the sky. They do not shout, they do not stir the air, they simply watch. From this height, a hurricane doesn't seem loud or violent. It appears as a spiral of white, spinning gently, suspended above the earth, like a breath held too long. Even the most powerful storms, when seen from space, look peaceful. Soft clouds circling an empty center, edges feathered like brushstrokes on blue canvas. And when a storm stalls, the view changes in a special way. It doesn't move. From frame to frame, hour to hour, it remains in place. A spiral unmoving, a stillness over the sea. A great pattern just hovering, turning slowly, but not drifting. A storm waiting. Satellites capture this patience. They see the same cloud arms wrapping around again and again, the same rain bands reaching toward the coast, the same eye blinking slowly in the storm's heart. To the scientists watching below, this tells a story of motion paused, a signal that the steering winds are quiet, that the atmosphere above has lost its path. But from up here, it's all art. Each loop is like a ballet, each band a ribbon in mid-spin. Each hour, the spiral breathes, slow, shallow, persistent. Satellites don't just see light, they sense heat, they track moisture, they listen to the quiet rhythms of temperature and cloud top height. They draw outlines of the invisible, the wind, the water, the energy shifting across sky and ocean. And yet, they never disturb, they only notice. And what they notice, we can now imagine. The Gulf of Mexico, wide and waiting, beneath a hovering storm. The Caribbean, rimmed in clouds, edges curled like seashells. The Atlantic, open and endless, with a spiral casting shadows on the sea below. There's no fear here, no urgency, just distance, just watching, just awe. And perhaps, in that distance, we understand something new, that storms, even the strongest ones, are part of a larger story. One told in time and temperature, in moisture and motion. They rise, they pause, they fade. And satellites simply remember. So tonight, let us rise too. Let us float just above the clouds. Let us become still observers, letting the world move beneath us without grasping, without pushing, just watching. There's peace in that. There's perspective. The storm is still turning, but from here, it is only a spiral, only light, only a pause in a greater breath. Hello again, dear one. Tonight, we follow the final chapter of the storm, not its end, but its unwinding, the soft recalibration that comes after chaos, the long, slow breath out after the heart has raced. This is the chapter where balance returns, but not all at once. After a hurricane has moved on, or faded entirely, the atmosphere doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It relaxes, gradually, carefully, one thread at a time. The winds, which once spiraled with fierce intent, begin to loosen. Gusts become breezes. Air patterns stretch and realign. Highs and lows shift across the map, like dancers resuming their places after an intense performance. The sky, once dense with clouds, begins to open. Grey becomes silver. Silver becomes pale blue. And then, light. The sun returns gently, not with blaze, but with warmth. A golden wash on damp rooftops. A soft gleam on puddles. Trees shimmer with rain caught in their leaves, now sparkling in. stillness. The air is still warm, still humid, but quieter, calmer. The earth adjusts. Rivers carry away the excess. Soils drink. Plants lift their faces again. Animals emerge from their hidden places. People open doors and windows, stepping slowly into a changed world. Everything breathes a little deeper. In meteorology, we call this a rebalancing of the atmosphere. The storm disrupted temperature, wind, moisture. But now, those elements begin to settle, like stirred tea slowly going still, like ripples on a pond returning to glass. This balance isn't perfect, not yet, but it's returning. And in that return, there is beauty. It reminds us that storms are not just destruction, they are part of the system. They transport heat from equator to pole. They release built-up pressure. They stir the skies, yes, but then they pass, and the atmosphere exhales. Nature doesn't hold on, it moves forward. And so can we. As you rest tonight, feel the calm after your own inner weather. Whatever stirred in you today, let it settle now. Let the winds die down. Let your breath become your balance. The storm is gone. The skies are lighter. The world still turns, but gently now, and balance returns. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we reflect not on the fiercest storms or the most powerful winds, but on something quieter, something lasting, something softly unforgettable. Slowness. In the world of meteorology, we often record storms by their strength, their category, their pressure, their peak wind speeds. But in the hearts of many who've lived through them, storms are remembered for something else entirely. Duration. The way they stayed. The way the rain lasted not for hours, but for days. The way the wind hummed, not howled, for what felt like forever. The way time itself seemed to slow, wrapped in the hush of clouds. Slowness becomes a kind of signature. Think of the rain tapping gently on windows through one night, and then another, of waking to the same soft grey skies, unchanged, of looking at a puddle that never shrinks, of hearing the steady whisper of rainfall where once there was silence. These are the quiet details people remember. They don't always speak of destruction. They speak of waiting, of watching, of the strange stillness that settles when a storm parks itself in the sky and simply lingers. It's a different kind of presence, not a burst of force, but a saturation, a softness that soaks into memory, like water into earth. Some remember hurricanes that stalled offshore, sending waves and drizzle for days. Others recall inland storms, tropical systems that wandered for miles, dropping inch after inch of rain, long after their names had left the news. Sometimes it's not even the storm's eye that leaves the biggest impression. Sometimes it's a single rain band, looping slowly over a neighborhood, drizzling in rhythmic pulses like a sleepy metronome. That's what slowness gives us. Not terror, but texture. Storm becomes part of the background, a rhythm to live with for a little while. We learn to wait, to adapt, to pause. Slowness asks nothing dramatic of us. It only asks for presence. And in return, it teaches patience. It teaches us to watch the way water pools and rises, to feel the softness of the air, to notice how the clouds hold light differently when they stay in one place. There's something comforting in that. Not all storms are remembered for their ferocity. Some are remembered for their company, for being the quiet guest who stayed a bit too long, and in doing so became unforgettable. So, tonight, we honour that signature, that slow spiral, that steady drip, that gently turning sky. the storms that stayed, the rains that whispered, the time that didn't rush. Slowness has its own kind of strength, and you, resting now, are part of that rhythm. No hurry, only stillness, only peace. Hello again, gentle traveller. Tonight, we drift toward a quiet truth, a gentle thread in the fabric of our warming world. It is not frightening, it is not loud, but it is worth noticing, softly, thoughtfully. It's the idea that storms may be slowing down. In recent years, meteorologists have begun to observe a subtle shift. Tropical cyclones, especially those near land, are moving more slowly than they used to. Not every storm, not all the time, but enough to ask, why? And the answer, softly spoken, may be climate change. As our planet warms, the air and ocean change their patterns. The jet stream, that high river of wind that helps steer weather systems across the globe, is showing signs of meandering more. It flows more slowly. Sometimes it forms bends that get stuck, and when those guiding winds stall, storms do too. It's not that storms are forming more slowly, it's that once they're here, once they've reached land or hovered near the coast, they tend to linger more often. And that lingering matters, because a storm that stalls brings more rain. Not necessarily more wind, not necessarily higher waves, just more time, more hours beneath the clouds, more inches of water, more long evenings of listening to the steady hush of rain. Scientists are studying this with care, looking at decades of satellite data, tracing storm tracks, noting how many miles per hour a system moves and how that speed has changed. The numbers tell a quiet story, one that suggests a warmer world might mean more storms that wait, that stall, that stay. But here, we do not offer worry, only understanding, only a space to reflect. The science doesn't ask for panic, it asks for attention, for listening. And when we listen gently, we learn. We learn that the Earth is changing in slow, subtle ways. We learn that warmth in one place affects wind in another, that oceans and skies speak to one another in long conversations of heat and pressure and motion. And sometimes those conversations lead to a storm that doesn't want to move on, a storm that pauses, that turns slowly, that writes its name not in speed, but in stillness. So tonight, as you rest, let this knowledge settle like mist. No urgency, just awareness. The world is warming, the storms are changing, and within that change, we find softness, we find rhythm, we find the calm that comes from paying quiet attention. Even science can be a lullaby. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we set sail for the equator, not to chase storms, but to find the quiet place where many of them are born, a place where the air rises softly, where clouds gather slowly, and where the wind seems to hold its breath. It's called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a long, dreamy name for something deeply peaceful. Meteorologists often call it the ITCZ, but here we call it what it feels like, the pulse of the tropics. This is not a single point. It's a belt that wraps gently around the Earth near the equator, a slow-moving band where the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere winds meet. Two trade winds drawn toward one another like quiet tides. Where they meet, the air rises, not in bursts, not in thunderous columns, but slowly, steadily. The heat of the sun warms the surface, the ocean breathes upward, and the air follows. Moist, warm, heavy with potential. This rising air forms clouds, tall, elegant, slow-growing. Day after day, they build and release rain, then vanish and begin again. These aren't loud storms, Their rhythms, afternoon rain, evening calm, a cycle so ancient, the trees have shaped themselves around it. And when conditions are just right, these small storms may join hands. They may spin. They may evolve into the spirals we call tropical cyclones. Here, in this belt of calm rising air, some of the world's mightiest hurricanes begin. But even then, it's not about force, it's about patience. Because this zone doesn't rush. The ITCZ moves not quickly, but like a tide. It shifts north in one season, then south in another, following the path of the sun. And as it moves, it carries its rain and rhythm with it, bringing life to rainforests, rivers, and oceans that wait beneath it. It's not a violent place. It's a beginning place, a place where the air holds a mirror to the sea, where pressure breathes in gentle gradients, where the sky seems to pause before it spins. You might picture it from space as a soft belt of clouds, threaded white along the curve of the globe, or from the ocean as a horizon of quiet convection, warm winds and occasional showers that tap gently on the decks of drifting ships. It's where nature dreams up storms, but slowly, lovingly, patiently, and sometimes, even when a storm begins to form, it stays there, held in the calm convergence, rotating in the warm, damp air, hesitant to leave, still part of the pulse. Tonight, we float here together. We listen to that pulse. We feel the equator breathe, not with rush, not with roar, but with softness, with rhythm, with beginnings. And in that breath, we find our own inhale, exhale, the pulse of the tropics. Hello again, peaceful traveler. Tonight, we offer a quiet contrast. So far, we've wandered with storms that slow, that stall, that linger like a long breath. But not every storm chooses slowness. Some storms speed up. And tonight, we explore why, softly, without urgency, before returning once more to stillness. There are times when a hurricane doesn't pause at the coast or meander over warm waters. Instead, it picks up speed. Its spiral tightens, its path sharpens, and it rushes across the map like a dancer suddenly finding the beat. Why does this happen? It begins with steering currents, those gentle rivers of air high in the sky, invisible to us, but powerful in their influence, can sometimes grow stronger, especially as storms move northward into the mid-latitudes where the jet stream lives. The jet stream is like a swift river of wind, curving around the earth from west to east. And when a hurricane is caught in its grip, it can accelerate. The storm doesn't resist, it simply flows. Other times, two systems interact. Perhaps a high-pressure ridge pushes from behind, or a low-pressure trough ahead pulls with subtle force. The air pressure changes, the path tightens, the storm begins to run, and still the spiral turns. But now it moves faster across land, over water, sometimes transitioning into a new kind of storm altogether, one less tropical, more spread out, carried forward by larger forces. Some of these fast-moving storms leave only brief impressions, rain that falls quickly and departs, wind that arrives in a rush, then vanishes. They don't linger in memory the way slow storms do, but they, too, shape the rhythm of weather. There are also cold fronts, long sweeping boundaries between warm and cool air. When a tropical storm meets one of these, it can be absorbed or redirected, sped up by the contrast in temperature and pressure. And yet, even in this motion, there is beauty. Storm accelerating is not chaos, it's choreography, a shift in tempo, a change in rhythm, still part of nature's quiet score. And eventually, even fast storms slow again. They move inland, they lose strength, they unwind, they disappear into the sky, like a note fading into silence. So tonight, we honor that too. The quick ones, the travelers, the storms that didn't wait. They are part of the pattern, part of the breath, part of the balance. And though they rush, they too return to stillness. As you rest, remember this: not all storms move slowly, but all storms eventually fade. All spirals eventually soften. And here, in this quiet space, we return to the place between wind and calm, between motion and stillness, between watching and dreaming. Welcome back, gentle listener. Tonight, we turn to nature's oldest meteorologists, the watchers, the listeners, the silent witnesses to every shift in sky and wind. We turn to the animals, long before satellites watched. From above, before radar scanned the clouds, the world's creatures already knew the language of weather. They didn't need forecasts. They felt the changes, subtle, invisible, ancient. And when a storm begins to stall near land, when the skies darken but do not roar, when the air thickens and the wind holds its breath, the animals know. They always know. Birds, usually full of song, go quiet, not in fear, but in awareness. Their chirps fade, their wings pause mid-air. Flocks that once danced across the sky now nestle into trees or shelter beneath eaves. Some leave entirely, migrating in silence long before the first drop of rain. It's not panic, it's intuition. The pressure drops, the air grows heavy, the storm approaches slowly, but the birds have already made their choice. Dogs may pace or whimper, cats vanish into their hiding places, cattle move closer together, horses stand still beneath sheltering trees. Even insects, busy, buzzing, ceaseless, disappear. Cicadas hush. Bees return early to their hives. Butterflies settle low in grasses, their wings still. Nature knows not just the storm's presence, but its stillness. There's a kind of quiet that arrives before a stalled storm. Not silence, but stillness. A pressure in the air, a pause in the normal. And animals, tuned so closely to the earth, feel it like a second heartbeat. Scientists have studied this. They've watched sea creatures dive deeper before hurricanes arrive, days before landfall. They've recorded changes in migration, shifts in nesting, movement patterns that align perfectly with weather systems hundreds of miles away. But it isn't science that tells the whole story. It's watching your dog at the window. It's noticing the birds that didn't sing this morning. It's hearing the stillness before the rain begins. And it's beautiful, because in that silence, there is wisdom. Animals don't question the storm. They don't try to control it. They simply listen. They trust what the sky tells them. And they respond with grace. Tonight, as you rest, think of that quiet forest. The birds tucked into branches. The fox curled deep in its den. The frogs waiting just beneath the surface of the pond. Not frightened, just aware, just still. You too are part of nature. You too carry the gift of listening, the gift of knowing when to pause. So let the animals guide you now. Feel the pressure fall. Let the world quiet and wait, softly. Hello again, dear one. Tonight, we return to the center, to the quietest part of the storm, to the place where wind forgets how to spin, where sky opens above and the earth exhales below. Tonight, we drift into the eye of the hurricane. It's strange, isn't it, that in the middle of all that power, there is such stillness, that at the heart of something so vast and alive, there is a pause, a breath, a silence. From above, the eye looks like a dark circle at the center of a brilliant spiral. A pupil surrounded by whirling cloud. a moment of calm in the dance of chaos. But from within, it is something else entirely. Imagine standing there. The wind, which moments ago howled and raced, suddenly fades. The rain stops. The clouds part. You can see the sky again, blue or hazy, sometimes even golden, filtered by the setting sun. And all around you, the walls rise. The eye wall, a towering ring of storm, circles the calm like cathedral pillars. Within that ring, the storm's strongest winds still spin, but inside, the air rests. This calm is not forever, but while it lasts, it is complete. Some describe it as eerie, others as sacred. Time slows here. The world narrows to breath and sky. You may hear birds. You may feel warmth on your face. You may almost believe the storm is over, but it's only the middle. The eye is a balance point, a center that exists because the winds around it are spinning so perfectly. It is calm because of the motion, still because of the storm's strength. And in that paradox, there is beauty. In meteorology, we study the structure of the eye, its pressure, its shape, its symmetry. A tighter, clearer eye often means a stronger storm. But here, we are not measuring, we are feeling the hush, the rest, the rare moment when nature, mid-motion, decides to stop, even just for a little while. Tonight, let the eye become a place in your mind, a place where thoughts slow, where time softens, where noise fades. You've passed through wind and rain to get here. You've listened to the storm. Now you've found its center, and in that center, you are safe. You are still. The storm may continue after, but right now, you are in the eye, and everything is quiet. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we stay beneath the clouds, not with fear, but with reverence. We rest in that long moment, the one where the rain just keeps falling, hour after hour, day after day, a slow and steady rhythm, soft as breath. This is a chapter about endless rain, or at least, the kind that feels endless. You may know it. You may have lived through it. The kind of rain that greets you in the morning, stays through the afternoon, whispers through the night, and is still there again when you wake. It's not a downpour, not a sudden burst. It doesn't rush or roar. It settles. It stays. Each drop joins the one before it, a chorus of quiet repetition, a lullaby of water on leaves, on rooftops, on skin, persistent, patient, present. In stalled storms, those that hesitate near land or spin slowly over a region, this kind of rain is common and beautiful, because the rain doesn't push, it doesn't demand, it simply falls. It soaks into soil, seeps into seams, rests in puddles and bowls of earth. It darkens wood, deepens greens, and silvers the sky, and in its endlessness, we begin to change. We slow down. We stop asking when it will end. We start listening instead to the rhythms, drip, patter, hush, repeat. To the textures, soft, steady, smooth. To the feeling of being surrounded, embraced, enclosed in a world wrapped in water. There's something ancient about it. In every culture, rain is remembered. In poems, in songs, in stories passed down. There is a kind of comfort in its sameness, in its refusal to rush. Even animals pause in long rains. Birds fluff their feathers. Deer wait beneath trees. The world accepts what is falling, because rain teaches one of nature's oldest lessons. Repetition is not monotony. It is devotion. It is rhythm. It is presence. There may be moments when the rain lightens, teasing a sky break, and then it returns, as if it never left, as if it had always meant to stay a little longer. This is how rain feels during a slow storm. It becomes the background to everything else, and everything else becomes quieter. And so, tonight, we honor it. That feeling of days defined by water. That quiet knowing that you are small beneath the clouds, and yet safe. That every drop is a gift, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. Let the rain fall, soft in your mind now. Let it blur the edges of thought. Let it repeat again, 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 until your body listens too. This is not a storm to be feared. This is a rain to be felt, and in its rhythm, you rest. Hello, gentle dreamer. Tonight, we come to the final moment, the quiet after, the breath of calm that follows the long, slow storm. This is the chapter where the sky, after days of grey, of water, of wind, opens. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with a hint, a shift in the light, a thinning of cloud, a slight change in the way the rain falls. Lighter now, less sure of itself. You look up and see brightness behind the clouds, a subtle silver glow, then a pale blue, then, slowly, as if the sky is remembering how to be itself again, sunlight, soft, warm, gentle on the skin. It pours across soaked ground, turning puddles to mirrors. It glistens on blades of grass. It wakes the air with golden heat, wrapping rooftops, branches and shoulders. The wind is quieter now. The pressure has risen. The spiral is gone. What's left is the world, washed and waiting. People open windows. Children step barefoot onto porches. Birdsong returns, tentatively at first, then in full chorus. The land, so recently buried under cloud, exhales, and you can feel it too. The stillness after the storm is not empty. It's full of renewal. Everything smells different, earthier, cleaner, rain-scented, sky-scented. There's a clarity to the air, as if the atmosphere itself has been wrung out and set anew. And in this freshness, we find closure. The hurricane, once stalled and powerful, has moved on, dissipated, unwound itself into memory, but its rhythm remains. In the soil, now rich and dark. In the rivers, running a little higher. In the trees, dripping gently in the sun. In your chest, where the breath is finally deep again. This is not a triumphant moment. It's not a celebration. It's something softer. A return. A rebalancing. A final note in the storm's long song. And as we close our eyes, we remember the journey. The whisper before the wind. The eye, the slowness, the rain. The breath of landfall, and now the quiet beyond it. The sky has opened. The light is here, and the storm has passed. So let it go softly. Let the clouds drift away. Let the memory become a story. And you, let yourself rest. The world is still turning. The sun is warm again, and above you, the sky is wide and clear. And now, as our journey winds down, may the quiet rhythms of the storm, its softened spin, its gentle pause, bring you peace tonight. We've floated through clouds, wandered through rain, and listened to the sky breathe in slowness. Perhaps you found stillness in the spiral, or comfort in the hush that follows. Wherever this story met you, I hope it brought a sense of rest, a soft exhale at the end of your day, a feeling of closeness to the sky and the sea, to the slowness of weather, and the softness of time. If these dreamy explorations have soothed your evening, feel free to like or subscribe, only if it feels easy, and only if it brings you peace. There's no need to do anything now. You can rest. You've arrived in the quiet after the storm. Let your thoughts drift like cirrus clouds on a sleepy breeze. Let go. Let the hush of the world wrap around you like warm air after rain. You are safe. You are still. Peaceful dreams and calm skies to you.